friends. The second major promise outlined in the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution is in many ways the big one, the complicated one, the freedom of speech and a free press. The First Amendment does not guarantee you the right to say or do whatever you want, in whatever forum you want, at any time, without anybody ever getting offended, taking issue with what you say, or responding to it in any way that they deem fit. No, the actual protections of freedom of speech under the First Amendment are rather specific, and they are as follows. Any form of speech, with very few exceptions we'll get to in just a moment, which does not just include verbal speech, communication, like what we're enjoying now, but also written communication, music, song, art and dance, symbology. All of these things could be considered speech, as they are media that human beings use to communicate ideas, thoughts, and at times calls to action, which is precisely what the founders and framers of the Bill of Rights in particular wanted to protect. They wanted to ensure that people could speak fairly and honestly about government and the way in which its policies were impacting their lives and communities, and that a free and robust core of journalists, people whose job it was to investigate stories of human interest and share information with the people, could operate without fear of government censorship. So, what is protected under freedom of speech? Specifically, all speech, with few exceptions, is protected from government censorship or prohibition, banning, before it can get out into the world. So what this is intended to do is prevent, say, the president or a cabinet secretary or a senator from using their connections to have a journalist or you as a citizen or resident of the United States arrested for a critical opinion or story published about them on social media or in traditional media. The idea here is to prevent people from being penalized for their viewpoints, no matter how uncommon, unorthodox, or objectionable they may be, with, again, just a couple exceptions. I've mentioned exceptions time and again, so quickly let's go over what some of those are. The First Amendment protects the content of speech, the message you're trying to communicate, from censorship. It does not necessarily protect you from regulations that would dictate how you can communicate that speech. For instance, if you want to host a political rally and deliver a big, raucous, loud speech calling for political or social change, you are legally, constitutionally enabled to do that. But you may not be able to do that with blaring loudspeakers in a residential area at 3 a.m. because that would disrupt peace and tranquility and people trying to get a good night's sleep before work. And their welfare may preclude your First Amendment rights in that particular instance. But as long as your content isn't being censored, the First Amendment is not being violated. Secondly, the First Amendment does not protect you from the private consequences of your speech. It only protects from government censorship. So, if you were to say, go on a hate-filled rant on Facebook and end up getting banned from the platform, but say you did, that is not protected under First Amendment rights. Meta, as a private company, has the right to regulate and moderate their platform and what they want people to be able to say and do on it as they see fit, and that's not a violation of First Amendment rights. Likewise, if people in your life were to completely cut you off or disavow you, or you were to get fired or penalized at your job for that same rant, that would not be a violation of your First Amendment rights in the overwhelming majority of cases. It protects speech from government censorship. It does not protect speech from consequence. Additionally, government employees may have certain additional regulations placed on their speech. For instance, as a government employee, an employee of the state of Tennessee, I have access to a great deal of students' personal information that is privileged and confidential. And if I were to leak or publicize any of that, I would not be protected from government and civil retribution, and rightly so. And finally, the First Amendment does not protect what is termed low speech. Now, that's a very vague category by design, but the idea behind it is this. If there is any speech that, according to well-informed or educated people, in this case it would almost always be judges, that does not have any real artistic, intellectual, political, social, or cultural value, if there's no point to anybody hearing the thing, even if it may be uncomfortable or unpleasant, and if speech has a likelihood of causing or encouraging harm or disgust or offense, it may not be fully protected at all under the First Amendment. Examples of low speech include direct threats to people's lives and property, insults intended to start fights or arguments, false or misleading advertising, the slander and libel of private individuals, and what over the years has been continually defined as obscenity, or any speech that is deemed to exist primarily to shock or offend people and without any of that artistic, social, cultural, or intellectual value. So you do have extensive free speech rights under the First Amendment, far more than any press enjoyed in the years leading up to the United States independence. But these rights are not necessarily completely severed from consequence, and they primarily concern how the government can interact with your speech.